All right, so the first vital tip I'd like to talk about is overfeeding. Now, we're all familiar with overfeeding. It's something that people talk about all the time, but this is a little bit different. Traditionally we warn about overfeeding because your ammonia will spike, you'll have a ton of nitrates, things that you can measure. But I actually have a tank right now where I'm sort of learning this lesson the hard way. I've been feeding a very high protein food once a day, and I think the protein quantity is so high that my shrimp are outgrowing their molts, and that they are growing so fast that they can't molt fast enough, and it's causing molting issues. So these shrimp are actually making it out of the molt, but their carapace, like the colored part, is actually starting to flare and peel at the edges. And, I obviously, as soon as I realized this, I'm making changes. I'm feeding a lot less. But this is just something I wanted to mention, and I really wanted to get other people's thoughts on. If you have any experience with this, please let me know. But yes, seriously be careful with your feeding, because the symptoms of this can go way beyond what a test can tell you about. So, even my tank showed no nitrates, it showed no nitrates, it showed no ammonia, and I'm still having deaths, and my hardness is just about perfect. It's not my hardness. I've eliminated that as a variable. So I'm really starting to think that this is an overfeeding problem. The protein is just too much. They're growing too fast. All right, so the second tip is something I've actually been seeing a lot recently on forums and places like Reddit. And I don't see it mentioned very often, but I just wanted to bring it to people's attention because if you're not careful, it can kill your entire colony. And that would be things like aerosols, flea medication, or pest control. My last apartment, I had a sign on the door the entire time I lived there, and it said, "Do not spray anything in this apartment under any circumstances because there's sensitive aquarium life." I was really paranoid about pest control going in there and spraying for roaches or ants or whatever it might be. The apartment was clean, but I was still paranoid that it might be some routine thing. And if you don't know, these pest control treatments will kill every shrimp. They are, people joke all the time that shrimp are bugs, and in this case, they are. I mean, these insecticides will kill them instantly. And the same can be said about a lot of aerosols. So if you don't know, it's definitely best to err on the side of caution. If you're worried about using something like, a cleaner, cleaning the glass with some side, detergent, or using Febreze or anything like that, just really err on the side of caution, because once this is introduced into the water, you're basically forced to do a massive water change. And as you know, doing a huge water change without time to properly drip it back in, that can be pandemonium in its own right. So just be super careful about things like cleaning supplies, things like pest control, flea medication for your pets. You want to wash your hands thoroughly before you interact with the tank at all when you've, done anything like that. Now, this last tip is something you might have heard if you've been around the hobby for a while, but I think it really bears repeating. And that is, I highly recommend that you lovingly neglect your shrimp. And when I say that, what I'm referring to is to avoid constantly fiddling with the tank. Now, you'll see online that you need to have a pH of 7.6 or 7.4 or 7 exactly. And if your tank tests at 8.0, you're probably going to panic if you're new and you're not comfortable yet and you're not confident. And you might think, oh man, I got to add acid, or I got to add tannins, or I got to chase this perfect pH. Now, this applies to all your parameters. If you have GH of 12, you might see on a forum that, shrimp can't molt at GH of 12. There's absolutely no way. And that's just not the case. I mean, if you give your shrimp a consistent tank, now obviously you can't do this at 10 pH, and you can't do this at a GH of 500, but if you give them consistent parameters that are reasonable, I guarantee that your shrimp will thrive if you just leave them alone, if you let them do their thing. And what new shrimp keepers will do is they'll add a bunch of shrimp to a tank, one of them will die, and they'll panic. They'll say, oh, is this a failed molt? Is this? Is this? And then they'll start making changes. And those changes lead to more shrimp dying, and now the shrimp keeper has no idea what's causing the deaths because they've introduced all these new variables, and things just rapidly get out of hand. So I guess to summarize this tip really succinctly, interact with your tank as little as you can, and let nature take its course. Especially if you have a planted tank, things will just absolutely figure themselves out.